Husband shut down his meddling parents when they demanded we move across the country so they could raise our kids the right way. I, 34F, have been married to my husband Jake, 36M, for 8 years now, and we have 2 amazing kids, Lily, 6F, and Max, 4M. We've always had a pretty great life together, living in a cozy suburban home in California, both with fulfilling careers, and surrounded by a tight-knit group of friends. Sounds perfect, right? Well, enter the in-laws from hell. Jake's parents, let's call them Barbara, 62F, and George, 65M, have always been challenging, to say the least. They're your typical conservative, set-in-their-ways type of people who believe they know best about everything. From the moment Jake and I got serious, they've been trying to micromanage our lives. When we got engaged, they insisted on planning the entire wedding. We shut that down. When we bought our house, they criticized every single decision we made about the decor and layout. But we managed to keep them at arm's length, limiting our interactions to holidays and occasional family gatherings. Things took a turn for the worse when we had kids. Suddenly, Barbara and George became experts in child-rearing, despite the fact that Jake is their only child and, by his own admission, they weren't exactly parents of the year. Every time they visited, it was a barrage of unsolicited advice and thinly veiled criticisms of our parenting style. "You're feeding them too much processed food," Barbara would say, eyeing our pantry with disdain. "They need more discipline," George would grumble, watching Max have a normal 4-year-old meltdown over a toy. We tried to be polite but firm, explaining that while we appreciated their concern, we were comfortable with our parenting choices. This seemed to only fuel their determination to fix things. The breaking point came last month. Barbara and George announced they were coming for a visit, which immediately put us on edge. They arrived on a Friday evening, and things seemed tense from the get-go. They barely said hello before Barbara was inspecting the cleanliness of our kitchen and George was questioning why Lily wasn't enrolled in more after-school activities. We made it through dinner with forced smiles and changed the subject whenever they started to criticize. After the kids were in bed, we all sat down in the living room, and that's when they dropped the bomb. "We've been thinking," Barbara began, her voice sickly sweet, "and we've come to a decision that we think will be best for everyone." Jake and I exchanged worried glances. Nothing good ever came from that tone. George cleared his throat. "We want you to move to Ohio." I nearly choked on my wine. "I'm sorry, what?" "Ohio," Barbara repeated, as if we simply hadn't heard her the first time. "We found a lovely house just down the street from us. It's bigger than this place, in a better school district, and we'd be right there to help with the kids." Jake's face had gone pale. "Mom, Dad, we can't just up and move to Ohio. Our lives are here. Our jobs, our friends, the kids' school." Barbara waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, you can find new jobs. And the children will make new friends. Besides, they're young enough that they won't even remember California in a few years." I felt like I was in some sort of twisted nightmare. "But we don't want to move to Ohio. We're happy here." George's expression darkened. "This isn't about what you want. It's about what's best for our grandchildren. They need a proper upbringing, away from all this California nonsense." "What California nonsense?" I asked, my temper rising. "You know," Barbara said with a sniff. "All those liberal ideas, the lack of traditional values. We've seen how you're raising them, and frankly, we're concerned." I was about to launch into a tirade, but Jake beat me to it. He stood up, his face flushed with anger. "That's enough," he said, his voice low and controlled but filled with fury. "Jake, honey," Barbara started, but he cut her off. "No, Mom. You don't get to talk right now. You're going to listen." He took a deep breath, and I could see him struggling to maintain his composure. "For years, Dad and I have let you meddle in our lives. We've tolerated your criticism, your constant need to control everything. But this is too far." George started to stand, but Jake held up a hand. "Sit down, Dad. I'm not finished." To my amazement, George sat back down, looking shocked. I'd never seen Jake stand up to his parents like this before. "Let me make this crystal clear," Jake continued. "We are not moving to Ohio. We are not uprooting our entire lives to satisfy your misguided belief that you know what's best for our children. My wife and I are raising our kids the way we see fit, with love, understanding, and open-mindedness. If you can't respect that, then you won't be a part of their lives at all. Barbara gasped. You wouldn't dare keep our grandchildren from us. Try me, Jake said, his voice ice cold. From this moment on, things are going to change. You will respect our boundaries. You will not criticize our parenting. You will not make snide comments about our lifestyle or our choices. If you can't abide by these rules, then you're not welcome in our home or in our lives. Is that clear? The room was silent for what felt like an eternity. Barbara looked like she was about to faint, and George's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Finally, George spoke, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. You ungrateful little. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By threatening to keep our grandchildren away? Jake didn't back down. Everything you've done for me? You mean like constantly undermining my confidence? Making me feel like I was never good enough? Trying to control every aspect of my life? Yeah, thanks for that, Dad. Really stellar parenting. I could see tears forming in Jake's eyes, years of pent-up emotions finally breaking through. But he pressed on. I love you both, I really do. But I love my wife and my children more. They are my priority now, and I won't let you bully us into living the life you think we should have. We're happy here. We're thriving here. And if you can't be happy for us, then that's your problem, not ours. Barbara burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. George looked like he wanted to say something more, but for once, he seemed at a loss for words. Jake turned to me, his voice softening. Honey, can you go check on the kids? I need to finish this conversation with my parents alone. I nodded, squeezing his hand supportively before leaving the room. As I stood in the hallway, I could hear Jake's voice, still firm but gentler now, talking to his parents. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the emotion in his tone. About an hour later, the front door opened and closed. Jake came to find me in our bedroom, looking exhausted but somehow lighter than I'd ever seen him. They're gone, he said, sitting down heavily on the bed beside me. I called them an Uber to a hotel. They're flying back to Ohio tomorrow. I wrapped my arms around him. Are you okay? He nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I am. For the first time in my life, I feel like I've actually stood up for myself. For us. We talked long into the night, Jake opening up about his childhood, the pressure he'd always felt from his parents, and how he'd always been afraid of disappointing them. But now, he said, he realized that the only people he couldn't bear to disappoint were me and our children. The next morning, we received a long email from Barbara. It was full of the usual guilt-tripping and passive-aggressive jabs, but buried in there was also a small note of apology and a reluctant agreement to try and do better. It's been a few weeks since then, and things are different. We've had a couple of short phone calls with Jake's parents, and while they're still not thrilled with us, they're making an effort to respect our boundaries. Jake says he feels like a weight has been lifted off his shoulders, and I've noticed he's more relaxed and confident than ever before. As for me, I've never been more in love with my husband. Watching him stand up for our family, seeing him break free from years of manipulation and control. It was like falling in love all over again. So, Reddit, that's my story of how my husband shut down his meddling parents and their insane demand for us to move across the country. It wasn't easy, and I know we still have a long road ahead in terms of establishing a healthy relationship with them, but for now, we're taking it one day at a time and focusing on what really matters, our little family and the life we've built together. Edit, wow, I didn't expect this post to blow up like it did. Thank you all for your kind words and support. To address a few common questions/comments. 1. No, we're not going to cut Jake's parents off completely. Despite everything, they're still family, and we're hoping that with clear boundaries, we can have a healthier relationship moving forward. 2. Yes, we've considered family therapy, and it's something we might pursue in the future if things don't improve. 3. For those asking about Jake's childhood, he's agreed to let me share a bit more. He was an only child and his parents, especially his dad, had very high expectations. There was a lot of pressure to be perfect in academics, sports, and basically every aspect of life. Any failure or deviation from their plan was met with disappointment and criticism. It's taken Jake a long time to realize that this wasn't normal or healthy. 4. To the person who asked if we'd consider moving to Ohio if Jake got an amazing job offer there, nice try, Barbara. But seriously, no. Our lives are here and we're happy. 5. Thank you to everyone sharing similar stories. It's comforting to know we're not alone in dealing with overbearing in-laws. Hugs to all of you. 6. And finally, to the Reddit comedian suggesting we counteroffer by asking the in-laws to move to California instead, thanks for the laugh. But I think we all know that would be an even bigger disaster, smiley face. Thanks again, everyone. Your support means more than you know. Final update, 6 months later. Hey Reddit, it's been a while, and I thought you all might appreciate a final update on the in-laws want us to move to Ohio saga. So much has happened in the last 6 months, and I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. Here's where things stand now. 1. Relationship with the in-laws. After the big confrontation, we took a couple of months of very limited contact with Barbara and George. We had a few short, polite phone calls, but nothing substantial. Then, about 3 months ago, they reached out and asked if they could visit. Jake and I were apprehensive, but we agreed, setting clear boundaries before their arrival. To our surprise, the visit went well. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't perfect. There were a few tense moments and some awkward silences, but overall, it was the most pleasant interaction we've had with them in years. They didn't once mention us moving, and they actually made an effort to engage with the kids without criticizing our parenting. Barbara even pulled me aside at one point and apologized. She admitted that she had been overbearing and said she was working on changing. I'm cautiously optimistic, but we're still keeping our guard up. 2. Jake's personal growth. The confrontation with his parents seems to have been a real turning point for Jake. He's been seeing a therapist to work through some of his childhood issues, and the change in him is remarkable. He's more confident, more relaxed, and he's even taken up painting, something he always wanted to do but felt too self-conscious to try before. Last week, he got a promotion at work. When he called his parents to share the news, he told me later that for the first time in his life, he wasn't seeking their approval, he was just sharing his joy. That was huge for him. 3. Our kids, Lily and Max, are thriving. We've been making a conscious effort to create a home environment that's the opposite of what Jake experienced growing up. We celebrate their efforts, not just their achievements, and make sure they know it's okay to make mistakes. Lily recently had an art show at school, and she beamed with pride as we hung her, adorably abstract, painting on the fridge. Max has discovered a love for bugs and spends hours in the backyard with his magnifying glass. We're letting them explore their interests without pressure, and it's beautiful to watch. 4. Family dynamics. We've started having monthly family meetings where everyone, kids included, can voice their thoughts, concerns, or ideas. It's fostering a sense of openness and trust that I love. Jake says he wishes he had this growing up, and it's healing for him to provide it for our kids. 5. The Ohio question. A few weeks ago, we took a family vacation to a lake in Ohio. It wasn't too far from Jake's parents, so we invited them to join us for a day. Watching them interact with our kids in a neutral, relaxed environment was eye-opening. They were more like the grandparents we'd always hoped they'd be. At one point, George pulled Jake aside, and I overheard him say, "You know, son, seeing you here. I think you made the right choice staying in California. Your family is happy there." It wasn't a grand apology, but coming from George, it was monumental. 6. Our marriage. This whole experience has brought Jake and me closer than ever. We've learned to communicate better, to present a united front, and to appreciate each other's strengths. Last month, we renewed our vows in a small ceremony with just our kids and closest friends. It felt like a fresh start. 7. The future. We're still in our California home, more content than ever. We're planning to host Thanksgiving this year and have invited Jake's parents. It's a big step, but we feel ready. We've made it clear that they're welcome in our lives as long as they respect our boundaries. Jake and I have also started talking about possibly expanding our family. Nothing definite yet, but the fact that we feel secure enough to even consider it speaks volumes about how far we've come. So, Reddit, that's where we are now. Life isn't perfect, we still have challenges and disagreements, but we're facing them together, on our terms. We're creating the family dynamics we want, not the ones prescribed to us. To everyone dealing with difficult in-laws or family situations, hang in there. Change is possible, but it starts with setting firm boundaries and being true to yourselves. And remember, the family you choose, friends, partners, can be just as important as the family you're born into.